أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لن ينال الله لحومها ولا دماؤها ولكن يناله التقوى منكم كذلك سخرها لكم لتكبروا الله على ما هداكم وبشر المحسنين.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. This is the reply of our Imam, Hazrat Khalifatullah, Hazrat Munir Azim, Ayyadullahu Ta'ala bi Nazril Aziz, to questions which both the members of the Jamaat and people of other faiths have asked Huzur, Ayyadullahu Ta'ala bi Nazril Aziz. The questions are as thus. Number 1. How to share a Qurbani? In case a poor man is giving a Qurbani and a rich one is giving a Qurbani, how to share the Qurbani? Number 2. At the time of the Muslims' festival of sacrifice, animal rights campaigners often raise their objection claiming that the Muslim way of slaughter is barbaric. What is your reply about this kind of objection? Number 3. Others proclaim that it is wrong for humans to consume meat at all, stating that this violates the rights of animals. What is your opinion on the matter? The question on Qurbani was asked by a disciple of the Khalifatullah, Khaja Moidin Sahib of Chennai. How to share a Qurbani? In case a poor man is giving a Qurbani and a rich one is giving a Qurbani, how to share the Qurbani? A Qurbani or Udaya, blood sacrifice or sacrifice of an Islamic approved animal for the great Eid of sacrifice, is mandatory upon every Muslim who is debt free and who has the means to do the sacrifice. According to the amount and opportunities which each and every Muslim gets to spend in the path of Allah for the sacrifice of Abraham, there is actually no difference between the share of the poor and the rich. According to the amount of meat received in an animal purchased for the sacrifice, the poor, according to his means, that is, whether he is participating in a collective sacrifice, getting a share out of 7 parts in an ox or buffalo or camel, or if he has got a sheep or goat as one whole part for himself, because there is no 7 parts shares in a sheep or goat, it counts as 1 part. Then, be it the rich or the poor, the sharing of the meat is the same. That is, it is to be divided into 3 parts for distribution. 1/3 for the poor, that is, the Muslim poor who do not have any means to participate in Qurbani and who really devours that meat. 1/3 for one's own Muslim relatives and friends, and 1/3 for oneself, one's own home. Now, it is advisable to distribute whether for one's relative and friends or even for the poor. One should divide the meat equally for at least 1 pound of meat each to be distributed to the number of poor selected, and 1 pound of meat each to those of the relatives and friends you have selected to give the Qurbani. This is both applicable for both the rich and the poor. Even the poor doing Qurbani should follow the same rules of sharing like the rich. Just like in the month of Ramadan, all Muslims, rich, poor, or even newborn babies, whereby the fitrah is obligatory upon them all, the rich has to pay and the poor as well. For example, when someone has taken a part in an ox and he gets 30 pounds of meat, thus he distributes the meat as follows: 10 pounds of the meat for the poor. He thus chooses 10 poor Muslims or 10 families or houses and give them each 1 pound of meat. 10 pounds of the sacrificed meat for the Muslim relatives and friends. He thus chooses 10 of his Muslim relatives and friends, only believers in the one true God and does not commit shirk, that he wishes to give, and gives them each 1 pound of meat. And lastly, he keeps 10 pounds of meat for his own use at home. Or if the one doing Qurbani is aware of the difficult financial situations of some, and if families having many children, thus the one doing Qurbani can then select only 5 of such needy poor Muslims and give each 2 pounds of meat, which equals to 10 pounds of the meat allocated to the poor out of the 30 pounds. Now, for a goat or sheep, having only one share for one person doing Qurbani, then the meat will be lesser in amount than one share in an ox or camel. But even then, the goat is distributed into 3 parts: for the poor, for the relatives and friends, and for oneself. Now, it is also perfectly advisable and permissible for someone to give his share of Qurbani, all his 3 parts of his share, whereby he invites his Muslim relatives and friends, some poor people and his own family, and they partake of the meat as a collective lunch or dinner. Or, if one desires, he can organize a lunch or dinner which the Qurbani meat and invites all the members of his Jamaat Muslim community, wherein the poor people, his relatives and friends, and own family members are present, forming part as one large community of Muslim, one's spiritual family, and they all partake of the meat. The second question is as follows. At the time of the Muslim festival of sacrifice, animal rights campaigners often raise their objection, claiming that the Muslim way of slaughter is barbaric. What is your reply about this kind of objection? Muslims only eat meat where the blood has been allowed to drain fully from the animal's body, and this is achieved by cutting the main artery and windpipe of the animal with a sharp knife, leaving the spinal cord intact. The lack of oxygen to the brain leads to an immediate unconsciousness, and whereas the convulsions which can be seen when the heart pumps out of the blood look violent to the onlooker, the animal feels no more pain. Experiments have shown that this method of slaughter, besides ensuring a clean quality of meat free of toxics, is also much less painful to the animal than the prevalent method in Western mass production of meat using stunning or electrocution, which, whilst making conveyor belt processing easier and looking more aesthetic to the observer, is both torturous for the animal and results in a harmful buildup of toxics in the meat. And the last question is as follows. But others proclaim that it is wrong for humans to consume meat at all, stating that this violates the rights of animals. What is your opinion on the matter? Yes, indeed there are those kinds of extremists among the different groups who go as far as attacking and killing people for the perceived protection of animal rights, but they miss a crucial point. Rights must also be balanced by obligations. So, if animals were to be afforded equal rights with humans, they must also be tasked with looking after other species, a task they are obviously not capable of. Allah has created the world as a hierarchy. He has given man an exalted position where all other creatures are subservient to him, but with it he has the obligation not to abuse his position and not to destroy the world entrusted to him. Those misguided campaigners who consider the consumption of animal meat an excess for human beings, should also logically eradicate all animals which live on the meat of others, as these should not have the right to kill other creatures for food either, and ultimately such a perverted logic would destroy the balance of life and eradicate all the finely tuned ecosystem which Allah has created interdependently. Animal welfare in Islam means that we may utilize animals for food and clothing and to do work for us, but we must adequately look after their needs and avoid excesses. There are categories of animals which are prohibited as food items, including all carnivorous animals and pigs. There are numerous reasons for such prohibitions, which is why hospitals, for example, avoid pork in the diet given to critically ill patients. But generally, we understand that Allah has permitted for us what is good and wholesome and has prohibited what is harmful, even if we don't always have full knowledge of the detailed effects of a substance. Indeed, nobody knows our needs better than our Creator Himself. Islam also forbids the consumption of anything which might interfere with the perception of our senses or blur or judgment, like alcohol or mind-changing drugs. Because we are all responsible for our deeds, we must ensure that we are in the full possession of our mental capacities. When the people come under the influence of narcotics, their judgment of their own abilities also become flawed, and Islam thus does not leave it to the individual to decide how much of a particular drug he can handle, but demands complete abstinence. It is often said that such prohibition does not work and that it merely leads to the criminalizing of people who will continue taking drugs. This is true where people do not agree with the reasons for a prohibition, and moral education must play a crucial role in this respect. Due to the internalized religious convictions of the members of a sound Islamic society, society's welfare is usually achieved by self-regulation of its members rather than by policing them.